Space Marine 2 has become the way into the Warhammer hobby for a lot of people. And why shouldn't it? The game features a great story, fun game modes, diverse weapons, and it appeals to that power fantasy we all have about butchering our way through an oncoming horde of alien bug monsters. The game's protagonist is Lieutenant Death Titus, a former captain of the Ultramarines chapter who was sent to the Deathwatch after being accused of heresy by a battle brother. When we meet Titus, he's the leader of a kill team sent to deploy a small virus bomb to halt a Tyranid invasion on the planet of Kadaku. By the end of the mission, Titus is the sole survivor of the kill team and is almost killed by a Carnifex after completing his objective. Miraculously, he is saved by the timely intervention of his old brothers of the Ultramarines' second company. But what would have happened if they'd arrived just an hour or even a couple of minutes later? That scenario is what we'll be exploring today in the vaguely different darkness of the far future. This video contains full story spoilers for Space Marine 2, so hit that pause button and play the game's campaign first if you don't want it spoiled. After his near-death meeting with a Carnifex in the prologue, Titus undergoes the surgery that makes him cross the Rubicon Primaris and is remade. Faster, stronger, bigger and better, like all Primaris Marines. He's then reinstituted into the Ultramarines chapter, now with the rank of Lieutenant. While he did previously serve as a captain of the same company, before being sent away to the Deathwatch, it's not like they could remove the current captain, one Sevestus Akron, to make room for Titus, so he's simply slotted in where there's room. He is then assigned a combat squad consisting of the two battle brothers, Chiron and Sergeant Gadriel, who together take the role as a three-man army, slaughtering their way through a mission to aid the defenders of Kadaku, and blowing up the invading Tyranid fleet's one and only hive ship. Later, while retrieving the Archmagus of the Adeptus Mechanicus called Nozick, they uncover a chaos cult conspiracy involving an artifact called the Aurora device, which is a weird conduit-type thing for warp energy. It's also the main objective and plot device of the first Space Marine game, and the reason Titus was accused with heresy in the first place, as he showed a strange and as of yet unexplained resilience to the warp while wielding the device. Nozick, the tech priest in charge of the Aurora project, is then killed, and Titus and his boys go to the hive world Avrex in the same system to continue fighting the Tyranids and to find Nozick's apprentice, the tech priest Marias Luce. After an ambush by the Thousand Sons and their cultists, Titus and Captain Acheron go through a whole ordeal to call for reinforcements. Not knowing whether or not the other nearby force of Ultramarines had heard the call, the squad is attacked by an unknown Thousand Sons sorcerer who calls himself Imura. Later, the Ultramarines move on to the last playable planet in the game, the Tomb World of Demirium. That is, Tomb World in both meanings of the term. While there, it turns out Imura has been manipulating the Aurora project from the beginning, wanting to use the device to power a warp rift, allowing for a chaos invasion in real space, and trapping Chapter Master Marnius Calgar in the warp, as revenge for when Calgar did the same to him some 2 centuries earlier. When I put it like that, the whole game just seems like a petty revenge story. But since that's pretty funny, I won't question it. The last missions of the game feature a full assault on the now activated Aurora device and the warp rift it powers. The traitor forces are hitting hard, and a last stand of the second company take place in the face of a seemingly unending horde of Thousand Sons and their demonic allies. Just as the company is about to be overrun, for the second time in the game, they're miraculously saved by the perfectly timed intervention of Ultramarines reinforcements, led by none other than Marnius Calgar, in a badass cutscene that single-handedly killed off half the Smurf jokes in the 40k community. After regrouping, the Chapter Master leads a final charge against the forces of Imura, and facing off against a newly materialized Greater Demon of Tzeentch, a Lord of Change. In the end, the day is saved. Obviously, Imura is killed, and Titus earns the laurels of victory for his efforts, and is brought along with Calgar to new missions, like the one we see in Amazon Prime's Secret Level. Not much needs to be changed in the true timeline for Titus to die. Warp travel is about as precise as an orc playing darts, so let's just say the Ultramarines fleet arrived in the Residius system an hour or so later. That's the system all 3 planets in the game are found, by the way. Other than that, everything prior goes as we know it. The Deathwatch kill team's Corvus Blackstar crashes, all 4 kill team members die before Titus finds them, the virus bomb is detonated, and Titus loses his fight with the Carnifex. However, instead of bolterfying tearing open the Carnifex the moment it's about to make its killing stroke, it simply does. Titus is torn apart, to shreds I say, and dies. A while later, a blue Thunderhawk lands in the Mechanicus facility, only to find a corpse clad in the black livery of a black shield of the Deathwatch. The Ultramarines would of course recover the bodies of the kill team to return the gene seed to their parent chapters. I imagine Calgar would want to inspect the bodies for himself, showing his cousins the appropriate respect. His shock would be enormous on finding that one of the corpses belonged to none other than his old friend Demetrius Titus, thought long dead. I can see him being filled with rage at the Inquisition for never revealing to him that the former captain was still alive and serving in the Deathwatch. Now this is where things get truly interesting. While just a normal space marine, Titus was the linchpin for the entire operation in the Residius system. His absence would cause big problems, not just for Captain Akran and the Second Company, but the entire sector, Segmentum, and even the entire Imperium. The first hurdle Captain Akran's forces would have to overcome without Lieutenant Titus is the activation of the planetary plasma cannons to blow up the Tyranid hive ship. We know that Sergeant Gadriel's squad was broken into 3. Of course there's the combat squad led by Titus, but there's also the combat squads Thalassa and Viridian, both consisting of 3 Marines. The last 2 members of Gadriel's squad are presumably the pilots of the Thunderhawks, ferrying the combat squads to and from the surface. Therefore, we can assume that Akran would simply deploy a 5-man squad instead of Titus's 3-man squad. This would draw resources away from elsewhere and would likely lead to higher total casualties, but it's safe to say that the hive ship is blown up just like when Titus did it. After all, while he's the protagonist, Titus is still just a space marine. In theory, anyway. After this is when things start taking a turn for the worse. Without Titus recognizing Archmagos Nossic's files on Project Aurora, it's likely that the rest of the Ultramarines would not find out about it until far later. In a similar vein, it was Titus that suggested breaching through the Tyranid swarm to the astropathic relay to notify their chapter master, and it was he who spotted where the Hive Tyrant was located. Without Titus, the swarm would hold out for days more, perhaps even weeks, probably resulting in millions more dead guardsmen and civilians. I'm shaking my head right now so people can tell I disapprove. The sorcerer Imura's plans were always twofold. Not only did he want to open warp rifts to unleash a chaos invasion, but he wanted to humiliate Calgar in front of his beloved chapter. This supports the theory that he'd allow the remaining Ultramarines to call for support, knowing that while numerous, Calgar was accompanied by less than company strength. As the astropathic message would be sent much later, Imura's forces would be consolidated and dug in by the time of Calgar's arrival. Taking on a fortified force while commanding a greatly reduced force of Space Marines himself, compared to the charge in the game, Calgar's defeat is all but certain. Rushing into the rift by himself without the aid of Titus and his squad, he would be unable to leave, and Imura would have his revenge. With Calgar being trapped in the Sorcerer's Jar, the remaining Ultramarines would surely be wiped out, rendering onto the chapter a defeat the likes of which hasn't been seen since the Tyranids invaded Macragge. In the wake of this monumental disaster, Imura's success is sure to be rewarded by Tzeentch with ascension to demonhood. The now Demon Prince Imura would then lead his forces into a full invasion of real space, forcing the Imperium to respond by mounting a campaign to defeat the Chaos forces. This, in turn, would take away valuable assets from elsewhere, guaranteeing increased death tolls in all other current campaigns being waged in the vicinity. We also know that in the real timeline, Titus's story is not finished. This means that we can assume that the consequences of his death would not stop at the decimation of the Ultramarine Second Company and the emergence of an entire chaotic invasion into the part of the Imperium we can assume to be Ultima Segmentum. Trying to speculate on what those consequences might be is a vain effort, as the ways of Games Workshop are as fickle as those of Tzeentch himself. Nevertheless, there is always the possibility of a sequel video in the future. Initially, I wanted to complete this video a couple of weeks to a month after the first one, but oh boy, do these take a lot of time to make. I'm not exactly a proficient video editor or script writer, but even though the video turned out a fair bit shorter than the last one, it still probably took me somewhere in the vicinity of 60 hours of work to make. That being said, I had a lot of fun making it, so there probably will be another one in the not too distant future. If you liked this little excursion into what could have been, I'd appreciate a like and a subscribe. And if you have any fun ideas for similar alternate history topics, please do leave a comment with it. Or send a letter, but that's considerably less convenient for us both. Anyway, thanks for watching.